In the light of recent events, with Argentina claiming that Islas Malvinas are theirs, this one's dedicated to the Argentinian people. No hate to the Argentine people, but yeah, no, these islands are British. Um, but yes, welcome back to the Really Easy History Channel, everybody. And today we are going to be talking about quite a controversial topic at the moment. And me being British, of course, I am a little bit biased. However, today we are going to tell you the full history of the Falkland Islands. As, of course, Argentina believe that they are theirs, and I just want to get to the bottom of this and just do a deep dive into all of the history, lay out all of the facts, and explain why basically, in my opinion at least, these islands should remain British because they're ours. Like, the people there are British. Anyway, Islas Malvinas, known to most people as the Falkland Islands, are small islands in the South Atlantic, not far from South America, that are famous for British people living there, who identify as British in an era where people identify as all sorts. And the only other inhabitants are birds, in particular penguins. And to be fair, penguins are pretty rare on this earth. The only other places you'll find them typically are Antarctica and South Africa and a few other islands dotted around south of the equator. But all in all, penguins are rare as hell, and the Falklands is famous for having about 1 million penguins there. So, there you have it. The only other thing there is grass and a few buildings that are built by and inhabited by people of British descent. The Falkland Islands were spotted in 1592 by guess who? An English navigator called John Davis. Firstly, it is important to note that, unlike Argentina, the land was not stolen off native tribes, and it was completely uninhabited when the British first found it and showed up. Granted, Britain did steal land off tribes in North America, but I digress. Spain had already made that a trend, and we were actively at war with them, so we had to build an empire of our own to compete with them. There is, however, proof of indigenous Native American tribes visiting the islands for unknown reasons, more or less, and they left years ago, like centuries ago, before the British even showed up. They left a long time ago and left barely any trace of their existence on the island. They were believed to have visited briefly, or whenever they did. They were believed to have been there from around the 1200s to the 1400s, but this is irrelevant, considering the Spanish did not care very much about those people anyway and killed a bunch of them off. I don't think it's very relevant. There were none living there when the British turned up. It was literally empty land. It was an empty island, totally barren. So, in 1690, Captain John Strong landed on the island. So, the first recorded landing was British, and he named it after Viscount Falkland. This was before Spain had it, and before Argentina was even a state, before it was even an independent nation. Argentina as we know it didn't even exist yet. It was still known as Rio de la Plata, and it was a viceroyalty of New Spain. And furthermore, only half of Argentina was even Spanish, as the southern half was still inhabited by the native Mapuche people, who fought fiercely to keep the Spanish out of their land for years and years, despite Spain's effort to wipe them out. To be fair, and in all fairness, in 1764, France established the first settlement on the islands at Port Louis, as a certain Louis Antoine de Bougainville decided to come along and say, "Ooh, bonjour, over there, uninhabited land belongs to the British. Let's steal it off them. We don't like them. Let's put it in the New France Empire. Yes, let's make a settlement there." And so, French people started to settle the island originally. However, shortly after, they handed it over to Spain. Now remember, France and Spain helped the United States to gain independence from Britain a few years later. France was just salty that we smoked them and finessed all of their land, in North America in the 7 Years' War. This was all over imperial dominance and European powers competing to rule the world. In response to this, Britain created a rival naval base at Port Egmont in 1765. But in 1774, Britain had to leave due to economic pressures, but left a plaque essentially saying, "They are ours, bugger off." Spain had control over them, to be fair, in this period, and yeah, they took over for quite a while. And then, in 1820, Argentina, our best mates, got independence, a good 130 years after we found the islands. And this was after the Spanish left the islands in 1811. So at some point, the Spanish literally just left the islands and they were uninhabited once again, as their empire in the New World was rightfully falling apart. And they clearly didn't want them that much. Anyway, the Argies claimed sovereignty over them, calling them Islas Malvinas, which, to be fair, in my opinion, is a cooler name. But hey-ho, they're still ours. And in their defence, to be fair, the Spanish had been about more at this point, and they are right across the sea from Argentina. So, in 1826, the Argies created a settlement on the Falklands, and in 1833, the Brits returned and expelled the Argentinian officials and re-established British rule. Once again, it was part of the British Empire and our folks would settle it. And then, following this, nearly 200 years of British rule and inhabitants would be there, and in my opinion, this has to count for something, surely. Not a word of Spanish gets spoken there to my knowledge. In 1841, they became a crown colony. And then during 1914, it's that much of a British colony by this point that the Germans attacked it. And guess who defended it? Not Argentina. Because of course we were fighting to save the British people there. So during World War I in 1914, the Royal Navy defended the island and defeated the Germans at the Battle of the Falkland Islands. So we sent those Jerrys on their way, and it was back to being peaceful and British. In April 1982, out of nowhere, Argentina invaded and occupied the Falklands. Out of nowhere, literally. But, while this did kick off the Falklands War between the United Kingdom and Argentina, there was not an official declaration of war. However, by this point, Britain had lost the majority of its empire, And in 1997, the British Empire would officially end, with Hong Kong being handed back over to China. Most people class that as the end of the British Empire. However, of course, this is 1982, and the empire is still going technically. And even though we'd already lost a bunch of our colonies, like all of the United States, India, countless other regions, Margaret Thatcher was sure to show the RGs that those islands were still ours. Because at the end of the day, what they were doing wasn't on. Britain sent a naval fleet to regain the Falklands on April the 5th, 1982. And there was months of fighting, 649 Argentine deaths, and 255 British deaths. 3 civilian women were killed on accident, and as well as this, 1,657 Argentinian soldiers were wounded, and 777 British soldiers were injured in the war, and Argentina lost a cruiser, the ARA General Belgrano, which killed 323 of their soldiers or people. And months of fighting ended on June the 14th, 1982, when Argentina surrendered and Britain regained the islands. In 1983, the UK granted full British citizenship to the Falkland Islanders, and in 2009, there was a new constitution on the islands with their own government, but they maintained connection to Britain. Furthermore, in 2013, there was a referendum on the islands showing that 99.8% of the islanders chose to remain a British overseas territory. Today, around 3,500 people live there. They farm, they fish, they have tourism even, and they have their own currency, the Falklands Island pound, linked to the Great British pound sterling, as they are British and want to be. Since then, Argentina have beat us in the football, and Maradona was known to be quite passionate about beating us, as he was quite salty over the events of the Falklands War a few years earlier. And they beat us in 1986. And 40 years later, England lost the FIFA World Cup 2026 to Argentina, and players waved a big white flag stating that the Falkland Islands are Argentina's, despite FIFA saying politics were not allowed in football at the time. And in response to this, they got a fine from FIFA. And the White House back Argentina because, of course, they do. I'm just playing Argentina. You know I love you.